you all for being here this afternoon. We're here to celebrate a tremendous victory for the American people.
Someone shut off there. Thank you.
We're here to celebrate a tremendous victory for the American people and all of those who care about innovation, a hallmark of what the American economy has been about. We live in an information age, though, and that information age has brought new competition. I want to thank my colleagues here today for responding to that threat of competition from around the globe and making the right investments and preserving what has been the skill set of research and development and innovation in the United States by making these key investments. I want to thank Senators Schumer and Young for their leadership in drafting, conceiving, and pushing through the Innovation Act, originally called Endless Frontiers. At that point in time, a lot of people probably were skeptical about the needed level of investment in R&D. But these two explained the fact that translational science had to be a cornerstone of what we were doing. That is, we had to move faster at translating the science that our agencies and organizations around the globe were so key at getting done. I also want to thank Senators Cornyn and Warner for their CHIPS Act legislation. I know people view this bill as primarily an incentive to bring home and onshore more manufacturing in the United States of America. But I believe this investment and incentive is just as important as any other incentive that we have in agriculture or any other areas of our economy. But the difference here is we've fallen behind, and now is no time. The U.S. economy has been paying the price, whether it's the transportation sector or tech sector or any of the other chip-identified products. And I thank our colleagues for not only passing the CHIPS bill in 2020, but also in helping us get these incentives in place. And lastly, I want to thank my colleague, Senator Wicker, for his great bipartisan leadership in originally passing the science provisions out of the Commerce Committee 24-4. That was originally the vote that we had. So that meant that was a lot of bipartisan focus on doing a couple of things. One, saying we wanted a new tech directorate at NSF, an organization that is basically charge had been basic science, and say we want a new mission at NSF. That is to translate science faster. That $20 billion investment, we believe, across 10 sectors will help accelerate the types of manufacturing that the United States needs in aviation and automotive and a variety of other sectors to help America continue to be competitive. Second, the ideas that Senators Young and Schumer had on tech hubs to say that it's got to be just more than Seattle and San Francisco and Austin, that we have to bring business, labor, and universities and creators together in various places of the United States if we wanted to accelerate innovation. And that legislation also said that if we were going to be successful in this innovation infrastructure of the future, we had to get more out of the population of America. So this is the largest investment we've seen in STEM in quite a long time, to invest in both the diversity of STEM education and science and geographic diversity. And Senator Wicker's leading the debate on changing the investment to the EPSCoR states and bumping up the level of investment from 13% to 20% over a 7-year window is really saying that we expect innovation to happen everywhere. And when innovation happens everywhere, that's opportunities for everyone. So this legislation is a major milestone, the largest single investment that we've seen in a long time in U.S. R&D. Not only is NSF invested in, but the Department of Energy, and that was a key cornerstone of getting this legislation successfully passed by making sure that both our national laboratory system and our university system participated in translational science. So a great day for what might seem to many Americans as a very kind of what does science and R&D really mean to me? Well, in reality, investment today means jobs for tomorrow. And in this case, hopefully, a price signal on the supply chain of chips that will help us start to reverse a trend on something that is costing consumers too much right now. And America needs to lead in the next generation of chip manufacturing. With that, I'll turn it over to the leader, Leader Schumer.
Thank you, Maria, and let me thank you for the great work you have done. She's been just relentless, not day in, day out, not even month in, month out, but year in, year out in getting this legislation done. I want to thank the great bipartisan coalition that we have had. Maria and Roger worked so closely together. Mark and John worked so closely together. And Todd and I got into this. I was passionate about investing in science over 5 years ago. And I talked to the heads of research institutions. I talked to companies, and they said, we are going to fall so far behind if we don't do this. And so I started thinking about it, and one day I was talking in the gym as we were sweating away on the bikes with Todd Young. And I said, you know, this really bothers me. He said, it bothers me too. And he started saying things that were the exact same things I was saying. So we became a team and put together the Endless Frontiers Act, no longer called that. I like that name. But Maria named it aptly the Chips and Science Act, and that's what it is, and that's what it does. But we had a great bipartisan team, and that was incredible. So Maria mentioned, these ideas may seem abstract, science, even chips, but they're concrete. Concrete in terms of millions, literally millions of American jobs. Concrete in terms of lowering people's costs. Concrete in terms of keeping America #1 in the world economy. These are real. And let me just say, this is sort of a Sputnik moment where America realized, this time it wasn't Russia but China, another rival power, would get way ahead of us if we didn't pull out all the stops. And this legislation is the first large step in pulling out all of those stops so that we can stay #1. I told my caucus the other day, our grandchildren are going to have good paying jobs in professions we don't even know because of these investments we're making today. And prices everyone knows that chips are causing car prices and phone prices and appliance prices to go up. They're going to start coming down with these investments in chip. And we've also realized that we have to think long-term. All too often, the Congress and corporate America is accused of thinking short-term, next quarter, next session. For the first time on a major piece of legislation, we are thinking very long-term as to what benefits America 5 years from now, 10 years from now, generations from now. That is a very, very important point. So this is transformational. I mean, I am just so excited that we have done this. It wasn't easy. There were people, some from our party, who don't want to help corporations, although we put in real guardrails so they can't take this stuff and go to China, and we help labor. There are some on the right side who said, we don't believe in, quote, industrial policy. But when China and Europe are spending billions to invest, we're in a new world. Back in the 1970s, 1980s, yeah, we could say, let corporate America do it on its own. But it's a brand new world with nation states trying to overcome us. And many of them are authoritarian and will set the rules if they become the leaders in science, technology, innovation, and advanced manufacturing. So this is really a turning point day, a wonderful day, and a day that hope continues. And one final point, going back to bipartisanship. In the last little while, we have passed 3 major bipartisan pieces of legislation: the BIF, this bill, and the gun bill. We can do more in a bipartisan way. We can do more, and as leader, I will try to make that happen wherever I can. With that, next we have Senator Cornyn.
All right. This is a bad day for President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party. The slumbering giant that is America has finally awakened to the challenge that we face from the People's Republic of China, their aggressive posture in the region, and the potential they would have of cutting off our access to advanced semiconductors. Now, a couple of years ago, I asked my staff for a manual on semiconductors. I said, do you have a semiconductors for dummies? I didn't know a lot about semiconductors, but frankly, the more I learned about semiconductors and these microprocessors, the more fearful I became about the vulnerability that this represents, not just to our economy, but for our national security. I reached out to my friend, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Mark Warner, who, as a result of our work on the Intelligence Committee, we regularly get briefed on the national security threats to the United States. But it doesn't take a lot of imagination to think if it were another pandemic, a natural disaster, or a forceful unification of Taiwan with mainland China, what that would mean when 90% of the advanced semiconductors in the world come from Asia. 60% of them come from the island of Taiwan alone. And so I'm grateful to everybody here assembled for working with us. Mark and I filed that legislation in June of 2020 called the CHIPS for America Act. So nothing around here happens very quickly, but all's well that ends well. Thank you.
I too needed a tutorial on semiconductors. Every Javelin weapon that we've heard about contains hundreds of semiconductor chips. Every Stinger has hundreds of chips. If you're waiting for your car to be delivered to your dealer, it's because of a shortage of chips. There is no way we will ever be able to persuade the Chinese to keep from subsidizing their manufacture of semiconductors. There's no way to keep our competitors internationally from doing so. And so unless we want to be stuck at 12% of the manufacture of chips around the world, we need to do what the Senate has indeed done over the last year and a half and what we did today in moving this bill over to the House of Representatives. I have every hope that it will pass. We certainly need it to pass. So a big step in regaining America's edge in semiconductors. But also, as Chair Cantwell said, there's another aspect of it that involves moving the National Science Foundation research from being primarily directed to 5 wealthy states to the EPSCoR program, moving that EPSCoR program from 13% to 20% of the NSF research. That is going to enable 25 states, like my state of Mississippi, like many of the states represented at this press conference. It's going to enable us to be part of the new wave of research to keep us competitive in quantum computing, in artificial intelligence, and in things of that nature. Now, let me say something about bipartisanship. There was a moment yesterday after as the cloture vote was coming to an end, when the Republican leader and the Democratic leader were seen shaking hands on the floor and chatting with each other, as if that were somehow something that was highly unusual. We move this Senate on bipartisanship, and certainly that's been the case with Senator Cantwell and me. I can tell you the President of the United States, Joe Biden, is celebrating at this moment with this victory. Gina Raimondo, my good friend and the Secretary of Commerce, is celebrating. The White House is happy about this. But there are officials from the Trump administration that are also ecstatic about what we have done. And I'm just going to take the opportunity to quote 3 of them. Ambassador Robert Lighthizer, the chief trade advisor to President Donald Trump, said this about the bill that we've just passed in the U.S. Senate. We are in this existential competition with China. The battleground of that competition is technology and chips, and that's where we're going to win it or lose it. It's in this bill. That's Robert Lighthizer. Mike Pompeo, CIA director under Trump, knows a little something about the threat that we face. Also then Secretary of State under President Donald Trump. He said this about this bill in urging a yes vote. Congress must pass the CHIPS Act for both our national and economic security. We have to become less dependent on China for critical technologies. And this is how we do it, says Mike Pompeo of the Trump administration. And Robert O'Brien, President Trump's national security advisor, says America needs this legislation today. We do need it today, and we're going to get it in a week or so, send it to the president's desk. And so it is a victory for this administration, and my hat is off to the secretary and to the Democratic leader for the part that they played, and I know they're smiling today. But this is a huge victory for these Republicans and for this Republican and for national security. And so I would end my comments today by saluting the bipartisan effort that was necessary to bring us to this point.
Well, thank you as well. Let me first of all thank Senator Wicker and Senator Cantwell for their relentless leadership on the Commerce title. I think the basic R&D is so critically important. I want to thank Todd Young and Chuck Schumer for coming up with some of the initial ideas around tech hubs. Critically important, the training component. You know, this piece of legislation, it has been a long and winding road. I've never seen a bill that's changed its names more times than this. And if it takes one more name change before it gets to the president's desk, so be it. I want to build on a couple comments, and I'll be brief. One, Senator Schumer said this is a Sputnik moment. It really is. John Cornyn and I sit in the Intelligence Committee week after week, month after month, looking at China's incredible advancements across the whole series of domains. One of the things nobody's mentioned yet is the first kind of shocking moment in terms of China threat was a few years ago on Huawei. I was an old telecom guy. The notion that China had a national security threat in Huawei and was setting the rules in the then wireless cutting-edge technology 5G, that was an alarm. And one of the things that is in this legislation, $1.5 billion for us to work in America and with our allies to create an alternative to Huawei and ZTE, more based on software-based systems that are called Open Radio Access Network, ORAN. Incredibly important. On the CHIPS legislation, if we had not done this, there would not be another American semiconductor manufacturing plant ever built in this country. Think about that for a minute. We had close to 40% of the market in the 90s. We invented semiconductors. As Maria and others have said, we're down to 12%. And as others have said, most all of the cutting-edge chips, we don't make any of them here. Disproportionately in East Asia, mostly in Taiwan, and as we've seen, the aggressive nature of President Xi's leadership in terms of threatening Taiwan. You talk about something that would not create a recession, but a worldwide depression if that supply of chips disappeared. This law will create 10 to 15 new cutting-edge semiconductor manufacturing plants across our nation. We will maintain the research leadership on the tools and equipment that go into those fabrication facilities. It will relieve, over time, the inflationary pressures on autos and other industries. Because the demand for chips, we've heard things like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, all other domains we're competing with China. Each one of those are built upon an almost inexhaustible demand for semiconductors. I want to echo what John Cornyn said. This is a bad day for the CCP and President Xi's ambitions in that part of the world and across the world. So this is an enormous step forward. It is around science. It is around taking on the issue that was first kind of raised people's attention with Huawei and next generation wireless. It will make sure that we regain the technology leadership around semiconductors, build those supply chains here in America. Candidly, I think we're going to have to revisit issues like artificial intelligence and quantum computing, synthetic biology, because this is a worldwide competition. I'll end with this, that's about the urgency of now. The fact that we passed this a year ago and it took us a year to get it to the president's desk, it woke up our European competitors. Germany has got one of our great American chip manufacturing facilities, Intel, in building a huge facility, potentially even bigger than the one in Ohio, because they woke up and got in this race. Global Foundry, the French have taken another great American company because they're making those investments. I think what we're doing here, we're going to have to stay competitive across the host of technologies, but this, echoing what Senator Schumer said, I think this will be one of the most historic pieces of legislation that will be the kind of turning of the page the same way the Sputnik moment reawoken American innovation. So congratulations to all involved. Let's get it to the president.
Todd Young.
Well, thank you so much to my colleagues who worked so hard on this initiative and shared my vision and the majority leader's vision to outgrow, out-innovate, and out-compete the Chinese Communist Party. We've seen the emergence of a strategic rival over the recent decades that has adopted a state capitalist model. The Chinese Communist Party, with great intentionality, intervenes in markets, attempts to distort markets to the disadvantage of the United States and others. And we need to respond in kind, and the traditional toolkit does not suffice. Meanwhile, we've had such dramatic changes in how our modern economy works that in recent decades we've seen a number of Americans feel overlooked and underappreciated, and frankly, they feel as though they can play a more meaningful part in our growing economy, and we need to invest in those people and in the places that they call home. This legislation does both. This legislation will provide the tools so that we can outgrow, out-innovate, and out-compete Chinese Communist Party and ensure that our values prevail, the values of the Declaration of Independence and not of the communist regime. And so I want to thank my colleagues, I want to thank my staff and all the others who made this possible, including Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party, who actively lobbied against this legislation. So what it will mean in coming years, coming decades, is more robust federal investment in applied research through our DOE labs and our research universities. That research, in turn, as Senator Cantwell has emphasized, will then be used through intellectual property being used by our private markets, our innovators, our entrepreneurs, our private investors starting businesses in places like Indiana, across the American heartland. That, in turn, will bolster our economic security and national security. We make some critical investments in near-term supply chain resiliency and semiconductors in particular. But what we can expect in years ahead in the areas of hypersonics, advanced manufacturing, quantum computing, autonomous systems, and so many other areas is every bit as exciting to me. So, you know, I've been struck not just by the substance of this legislation, but during this time of tribalistic politics and a lot of cynicism, frankly, about our federal government, I think we should underscore the importance of this moment for the institution of the United States Senate, more broadly of the Congress and our federal government. We can do hard things. We can do really important things amidst all the sturm and drang. It just takes, you know, a handful of committed legislators to demonstrate the leadership, to make hard arguments, and to persist with those arguments over a period of time. And so we have been able to do something that has been much discussed for a lot of years around here, reinvesting in our national innovation ecosystem And it won't just be this generation, it will be future generations that will handsomely benefit from this important success. And I'm just grateful to play a part in the entire effort. So with that, we take any questions?
Questions on this subject only?
Sure.
Hi, Brendan Bordelon, Politico. I wanted to ask, obviously, big step today. Congratulations to get this across the finish line. The House still needs to vote to pass this legislation, and there has been some efforts by, I think, Senator Bernie Sanders in particular, to talk about corporate welfare, saying that these subsidies are sort of a giveaway for the chip industry. Are you guys hearing any rumblings to a similar effect among Democrats in the House? Is that a concern? What are you guys doing, if anything, to talk with your
I think two things on the House. One, there will be overwhelming support in the Democratic caucus in the House for this bill. It probably won't be unanimous, but it'll be overwhelming. Speaker Pelosi, I've talked to her almost on a daily basis, and she's always asking, when can we get it? She'll be for it. But what's also interesting is I believe it is now there are 6 or 7, and all the chairs of the major committees support this bill in the House. But so do the ranking members. There are 6 or 7 ranking members who support this. McCall, and who's the head of the rank on intelligence? Lucas, Katko, Granger. Who's the intelligence guy? Turner, and there's 1 or 2 more. So this is going to get broad support in the House.
Shepardson.
Can I ask, are there other parts of the supply chain besides chips that you think Congress might look at down the road? And how quickly, or what was the key issue do you think that got this over the top? Was it those national security briefings? Was it the concern about Taiwan and the supply chain?
I'll just answer the second and call on Marie. What brought this over the top is the broad support it had on such a large bill. It's $280 billion over 5 years. We had business. Chuck Schumer was on the phone with the head of the Business Roundtable and the head of the Chamber of Commerce and the head of Ford and the head of GM saying, please tell people how important this is. But it had labor support. The AFL-CIO endorsed it. It had the large support of the university community. It had the support of the scientific community. Rarely on such a large bill do you see such broad support. Maria is going to answer the first question, supply chain.
Yeah, there is direction here for the Department of Commerce on mapping to play a larger role, particularly as it relates to the manufacturing sector. We wish we could have done more, but maybe that'll be something in the future. But I guess what I would say on that last part is, I think you heard from the intellectual capacity of my colleagues. No one was speaking from notes here. And that is because these people understand what was at stake. It's so easy to simplify this debate into some issue, as some of our colleagues have. But the people who went, as Senator Cornyn said, even I, when I first was given this task, I was like, well, wait a minute. Having worked in the tech sector myself and helped startups, I was like, well, I don't know if government should be doing all of this. But when you looked and saw the details of what was happening, I mean, I guess that's what I would say here, is that these people all really did the homework. And what we became convinced of is that there was a real problem here. And that is the credit that Todd Young is talking about, is that even though you have all this rancor here in the U.S. Capitol about so many other things, when faced what is really a threat to the United States' competitiveness, we responded in a bipartisan fashion. And Europe should listen to that, and Asia should listen to that. There were people betting against us. They were like, the system's broken, you can't get this done, no one is going to care. And each one of us took that task to heart, and I think that's what made the difference. So you have real believers here in the details of these issues, and every one of them came, at a different way. I mean, Senator Schumer and Senator Young obviously representing states that want to have more of a tech economy. Senator Cornyn and I, where did he go? He left. States that already have a tech economy and know how much we believe in that, and we want to see it happen everywhere. But I think really the substance of the facts led people to get away from this kind of distortion that people are saying and get down to the reality of the situation. So I give us a lot of credit for responding on behalf of America. That's who people responded on behalf of America and America's future.
Maria, can I just add one thing here?
Yep.
Beyond specific supply chains, China has laid out, maybe too clearly, in their Made in China 2025 document, the technology domains, 17 of them, where China wants to dominate. We don't even have, if you ask the CIA what our key technologies are, if you ask Commerce, if you ask OST, the Office of Science Technology, you have different lists. Now, I'm not sure we ought to have the same exact list, but this is a technology race, and we have never faced the challenge that we faced with the People's Republic of China. With the size of their economy, the investment they make, the $500 billion a year of intellectual property theft. So I think there are going to be other areas we will have to revisit. But that's, it's going to take bipartisanship. A lot of us have been involved in a lot of bipartisan gangs. We're going to give Chuck his bipartisan tattoo for gang member.
And help make all the bipartisan.
A gang member. But I think this, I'd point out the 2025 document was pretty chilling.
Thank you, everybody.
Just one point. This is an economic play, this is a national security play, but this is also a diplomatic play. And let me explain that real briefly, Leader, because I know we're all busy. We have the opportunity through mechanisms laid out in this legislation to crowd in allied country investment in some of this tech development, to crowd in the involvement and collaboration of some of the most talented scientists in the world. This is a strategic advantage for the United States, where we're leveraging our values, which lead to our alliance system. China, they have vassal states. They do not have allies. So if we think about this intergenerational competition with the Chinese Communist Party, if it's the United States versus China, some get apprehensive about that. If instead we play our cards right and regard this as a challenge against what we call the West versus China, we win every time. So thank you.